officially of COPD, though friends and family say they believe Agent Orange had a role.
There's a saying that says that I was killed in Vietnam, just haven't died yet. And that pertains to those that have been affected with Agent Orange.
Akavana's widow, Garnet Akavana, says she feels the pain of her husband's death particularly hard on Memorial Day. She remembers her late husband as a kind man with a warm sense of humor, but says things like war films and even the sound of jets overhead would take him straight back to Vietnam.
After he came back, he just got changed. He couldn't watch Pearl Harbor or anything like that because he said, they're coming, and I heard those bombs.
Akavana says life has been hard without him. Between her grief, financial struggles, and trying to navigate the Veterans Affairs system. Their story is hardly rare in Alaska, home to the nation's highest population of veterans per capita. Ann Masker moved to the state with her husband Willard after his service in Vietnam.
His favorite thing was scrambling around the Wrangell Mountains looking for Dall sheep. The reason he went was for the peace.
Willard succumbed to Agent Orange-related vascular dementia a few years ago, though Masker says it felt like she lost him years before he died.
The kinds of things that he loved to do, he couldn't do, so he would spend literally hours in his recliner with the clicker, watching TV, watching sports, watching this, watching that, and drifting off.
Masker says this time of year always brings back memories of the life she shared with her husband.
I miss him every day, and Memorial Day will probably magnify that, but I'm so proud of him and who he was and of the many people we knew and people we lost. And Memorial Day is all about respect.
Looking back on his life and service, Benno Cleveland echoes that sentiment. He's preparing a speech for the community's annual Memorial Day ceremony to honor the service members who gave their lives for their country, either in wartime or decades after they served. Reporting in Fairbanks, I'm Shelby Herbert.
That story was produced by the American Homefront Project, a public media collaboration covering American military life and veterans. Well, looking for some good news? Coming up, the latest on Corpus Christi's water crisis and the possibility it's easing. And that screw worm that's threatening Texas ranches and Texas agriculture, there's some indications we're winning the battle, although the war may go on quite a while. Those stories and a whole lot more as the Texas Standard continues. Texas Standard Time Check. We are coming up on 19 minutes past the hour.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner. Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Realtors, providing representation at every stage of the home ownership journey, helping clients understand their options and manage complex transaction details. Info at texasrealestate.com.
Good morning, 1019. This is News 88.7 with a look at the weather. Here's ABC 13 meteorologist Kevin Roth.
We've got a chance for some afternoon downpours today. Overall coverage about 30 to 40%, but things really start ramping up as you head into the weekend. And it's a holiday weekend at that. Saturday, an 80% chance of showers and thunderstorms. Could see some localized street flooding. It is a day with widespread heavy rain. And those elevated rain chances continue into Sunday as well. 70% coverage on your Sunday. Some of that could come in the morning. We'll continue rain chances through next week. I'm ABC 13 meteorologist Kevin Roth for News 88.7.
Doom scrolling. Let's break that habit, folks. I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, where if you want to know what's going on in the world and why it matters, all you have to do is give your thumb a rest and perk up your ears. We've got the news, but we've also got curiosity, joy, and surprise. Tune in for Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Weekend Edition, Saturdays and Sundays from 7 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm David Brown. It has been a challenging spring for Corpus Christi, Texas. First, cities dealing with a worsening water crisis. And second, this is apparently unrelated to the water crisis. Several members of city council have been trying to remove the mayor, Paulette Guajardo. This week, there was movement on both fronts. An update on the water crisis and a court hearing in the mayor's legal fight to stay on as the city's top elected official. KEDT's Rob Boskamp gets us up to speed.
Procedural discussions for the mayor's pretrial hearing were held in executive session. During that time, the council appointed former Nueces County Judge Terry Shamsi as special counsel. Council members also voted to schedule additional pretrial hearings for May 27th and June 2nd.
Truth fears no investigation, and they don't fight and sue your peers, and you don't fight to not be deposed again unless you have something to hide. So far, there's 2,489 votes on my petition to remove the mayor.
That was Rachel Caballero during public comment. She filed the petition requesting the mayor be removed from office. The petition, originally signed by 6 residents, stems from a 2024 city council vote on a $2 million taxpayer-funded incentive for a downtown hotel project. Guajardo is accused of misconduct related to being aware of an altered FEMA screenshot in the project developer's presentation. Meanwhile, a window for the city to declare a level 1 water emergency has been moved from September to December. The update follows recent regional rainfall, giving area reservoirs some much-needed relief. Lake Texana, east of Edna, jumped over 20% in capacity over the past month. Lake Corpus Christi was back in double-digit capacity for the first time in weeks. Council members also postponed a vote on proposed changes in the city's drought contingency plan. During the discussion, it was brought up that under the proposed water use plan, apartments would be classified as commercial water users.
Treating them as a commercial unit actually benefits them in terms of looking at historic usage for their facility and understanding their needs.
I just feel that apartments or homes also, I mean, I used to live in an apartment, that was my home, and I should be under residential, and I should be able to use 6,000 gallons of water per unit.
That was District 3 Councilman Eric Cantu and Corpus Christi Water Chief Operating Officer Nick Winkleman. The city is expected to meet with the Corpus Christi Apartment Association this week. City Council is set to vote on a final plan in its June 2nd meeting. The Water Department proposes requiring customers to cut water use by 25% during a Level 1 emergency. I'm Rob Boskamp in Corpus Christi.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard. Agriculture officials in Mexico are dealing right now with a horde of flesh-eating parasites. The New World screwworm is a fly whose larvae burrow into the skin of animals like cattle, sheep, and deer, often doing quite serious harm in the process. We should note that screwworm cases have been confirmed less than 100 miles from our southern border. Should they reach Texas, the flies could cause serious economic problems for industries like hunting and ranching, which is why the federal government is spending millions trying to push them back from the border. For more on these efforts, we're joined now by Tracy Tomasic. He is Associate Director for the Texas Farm Bureau, responsible for livestock and animal health. Tracy, welcome to the Texas Standard.
Thank you, sir, and appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Appreciate you doing it. What kind of impact are these screwworms having right now in Mexico and Central America? Could you say more about that?
Yes, unfortunately, they're having a devastating impact on animal health and the productivity of the farms and ranches in those areas. The population of those fertile wild New World screwworm flies has just grown, festered in the central part of Mexico and also Central American countries over the last couple of years. The things they've done in Mexico to help mitigate the increase in those populations have slowed it down, but certainly have not stopped it.
So folks understand what's at stake here in Texas for ranchers, for agriculture. Could you give us a sense of what this means if the screwworm does in fact come into Texas?
Yes, the estimates that we project would be well over $8.5 billion from a livestock standpoint, and boots on the ground impact is going to be much more consistent and constant. Evaluation, physically walking up to or being next to your livestock, whether it's sheep, goats, cattle, horses, pigs, and examining those animals for wounds that have been infested with a New World screwworm fly. It's the time and effort that really adds up.
It's my understanding that part of the U.S. strategy to keep them out of Texas and some of the southern states involves dropping screwworms out of airplanes. What's that about?
Yeah, it's actually a decades-old technique and response. Those flies that they're dropping out are sterilized. And the unique thing about this particular species, the screwworm fly, is the females only mate one time in their life cycle. So if they mate with a male that's sterilized, they'll only have unfertilized eggs, and therefore those eggs won't hatch, ultimately breaking the life cycle.
How long are these operations going to go on?
This is a very long-term operation. Right now we're working as fast as possible to increase the production capacity of these sterile flies. And if you think back into the last time that we had a long-term response for New World screwworm in an eradication effort, it was the 50s, 60s, and even the 70s. So we've got what could be a decades-long operation to move these flies from the Texas border all the way back down to Panama with the Darien Gap.
Tracy, is it reasonable to assume that it's is this something that can actually be prevented altogether?
I think that we're on the cusp of turning this thing, this population back. And yes, and when I say on the cusp, we have to think about the timeline that we've endured. A year ago, all the models said that we would have screwworm flies in Texas, but the work with our federal partners and then the Mexican government and the Mexican ranchers has given us time to start the construction of another sterile fly facility in Texas to improve and enhance our distribution techniques, those sterile flies, and ultimately make them all where we anticipate those flies to move next and at much slower rate. So, yes, we are prepared for an infestation to occur in Texas, but I think that we've proven our track record of delaying that and done extremely well with the strategy that's in place so far. So I think the takeaway here is that when we do hit in Texas, we are prepared to respond quickly, and we will be able to severely limit the movement of those flies once they get into the United States in a way we haven't seen before.
Sounds like they're very encouraging news indeed. If you want more information on these screwworms, we have plenty of links on texasstandard.org. We've been speaking with Tracy Tomaso, Associate Director with the Texas Farm Bureau. Good to hear, Tracy. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Support for Texas Standard comes from the online UT High School, offering a full-time diploma program for remote, asynchronous learners throughout Texas. More at highschool.utexas.edu/tuition-free.
Hello, I'm Ernie Manous. Our show Hello Houston is live on the radio on News 88.7 from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. weekdays. But we can also give you video access to Hello Houston 24/7. Just head to our YouTube channel for full shows and isolated segments like my interviews with local and national celebrities. It's Hello Houston, giving you full access to our show 24/7 via our YouTube page. So catch up on these missed episodes. For more info, check out the Hello Houston page at HoustonPublicMedia.com.
Ever have a moment when you learn the truth and this changes thinking about a whole lot of things? I'm Brooke Gladstone from our media page, and I have that experience every single week. It's kind of a rush. So join us as we stories
On the Media, Saturdays at 5 p.m. on News 88.7.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Hero. Hurricane season starts in 10 days, and forecasters with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration have released their latest projections. Our Kyle McClanahan reports.
Hurricane season officially begins June 1st, and NOAA is predicting 8 to 14 named storms in the Atlantic this season. Of those, NOAA is forecasting 3 to 6 hurricanes and 1 to 3 major hurricanes, meaning a category 3 to 5 storm winds at or above 111 miles per hour. NOAA then triggered those and announced the predictions Thursday. It's a below average prediction is not guaranteed the season.
It's very important to understand that it only takes one to have that category 5 make landfall in the past season.
January season only means that they travel with below average Atlantic hurricanes. But this isn't like that.
songwriter and frontman of the Dallas-based hip-hop collective Cure for Paranoia. The group just won NPR's annual Tiny Desk contest, which would send them on tour across the country and raise their profile significantly. Cameron, I mentioned earlier how your music has echoes of Outkast and The Roots. Was that the kind of music you were into? What were you listening to growing up?
I mean, I think my biggest musical inspiration growing up was Lauryn Hill.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially Unplugged 2.0, which doesn't get really the recognition I think it deserves, but it really did completely change the way I presented myself as a musician, because she's just so authentically herself in that project, and being open about like her mental health and her dealings with the industry. And I really wanted to be that same type of artist.
What's cool to me about the way that you use music here is that, often music is sort of a one-way street in the sense that if you're up on stage, you're performing and, the audience is taking it in. But here, in a way, this is part of your healing, right? When the audience is there reacting to what you're doing, and they become part of your story.
Yeah, 100%. And on top of that, like being inspired by artists that made me want to be myself and not like them, because they're so themselves. I think that's what people kind of get whenever they come to my shows. It doesn't necessarily make them want to be me, but it, inspires them to want to pursue what it is they're after.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. When I asked you if your life had changed, what you responded with, I was a little surprised by it, because you defined that as followers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that what it's all about? Amassing followers?
I think so. It is a complete physical representation of the change, especially in this day and age. I think the main way that my life changed, especially last year, was like I really learned to trust myself. And I think Tiny Desk had made me really kind of like hide behind the band in a sense, and think that the only way that I was going to make it was if I was like with the band. The following is one thing, but it's another thing that I literally just set it up my own stack of voice and rapping to it. It was literally just so it really gave me a newfound trust in myself and what I was capable of doing.
I was going to say, that does speak a lot of your talent, because how many young people can you imagine set up feeding weathers that you probably did once upon a time, and they try to put it out there the way how they
delve into like a diary almost. I dealt with so much last year. I dealt with loss and grief and just self-discovery and all these things. Halfway through the year last year, on day 183, my mom reached out to me and congratulated me on being halfway through the year. And she was like, just telling me I'm so proud of your dedication, and you said you're up for something new.
And this is most important anniversary.
But even just deeper than that, just like she's really watched me. Like I used to sell my CDs at malls to get my name out there, and I just really I made a commitment to myself that was like I'm either gonna be famous or I'm gonna be homeless. And coming into that music, I just put everything into it. But long story short, she ended up having like a minor heart attack the same day that she texted me that. She's all right now. Well, no. She passed a couple days later initially. Sorry. It's totally fine, not your fault. But the main thing is that whenever I was at the hospital with her the whole time, the whole thing she kept saying was, did you do your verse? Make sure you did your verse. And I think it was really her pushing me to finish the daily series, because I mean, I had every reason to stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would have been like, I would have had every right to quit. But I knew that would have made her like so sad if like that was the reason why. You know what I mean?
I do.
And the following, how it like jumped up like crazy, it all happened because I kept going. Which is why I say like the following is not everything, but it is a literal physical manifestation of like what happens when you keep going, especially when you have a reason not to.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your mom and what a loss that must have been, but at the same time, wow, the fact that you felt like this was something you need. She gave you something there.
Yeah, 100%. And I also know, I think I would be crazy not to think that all of these like blessings that are coming in are because of her. You know what I mean? She's got something to do with it, because it's too crazy.
Do you think Dallas makes you sound a certain way, or could you do what you're doing anywhere?
I think I know for a fact that I could do what I do anywhere. I mean, a lot of people that even come up to us at our shows, the first thing they ask me, they're like, "Are you from Chicago? Are you from?"
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. And not to dog my own city, but it is the highest of compliments when people don't assume that I'm from Texas.
Why is that? Say more about that.
I mean, Texas is just Texas. It's a big part of why I was so afraid of being myself growing up, because it's just like we're not as spoken as other places.
Yeah, there's that for sure, but there's Erykah Badu who's from Dallas.
I mean, Erykah Badu only got popular after she went to Brooklyn.
Well, there's that for sure, but her name is associated with Dallas, and now people are going to associate Cameron McLeod with Dallas.
100%.
Yeah?
But not to seem so jaded, but it's like Texas tends to not really support its own artists until someone else does.
But you could change a lot of stuff now, because this is a kind of a lifetime for some people.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think those are going to be some big shoes to fill, especially compared to who's the face of this place.
What do you think needs to change in Texas or in Dallas to make it more hip-hop friendly? I mean, a different style of hip-hop, obviously, is associated with Houston big time.
Yeah, I think it's more so about just the embracing authenticity. To sound like things that have already made it.
Right. Cameron McLeod is the songwriter and frontman for Cure for Paranoia, the Dallas-based hip-hop collective that just won NPR's Tiny Desk contest. Cameron, huge congratulations to you. Really nice to get to say hello, and we're all rooting for you as this new tour and all this success comes rolling in.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you, man.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas brand new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
Morning Edition takes you across this country and around the world with stories that keep you informed and the context to understand what matters. The news comes at you quickly, but we slow it down to examine each story from different angles and give perspective on what might happen next. A brand new day comes with new possibilities and a new edition of Morning Edition from NPR News.
Morning Edition, weekdays 5 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're listening right now. Take the next steps and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference, and what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
You're listening to News 88.7.
This is Liz Garten Scanlon with Typewriter Rodeo. We type poems on vintage typewriters on whatever strikes your fancy. Empty nesting. When baby birds leave the nest, they leave for good. Their parents bringing them takeout for a few days while they learn to forage and find their wings. Our babies come back and back, bringing their own twigs and fluff, stories of people we've never met, and voices familiar but changed in ways we can't identify. Our nest's proud and crumpled under the weight of everyone's feelings and efforts, and just everyone's big, full-grown bodies, more like planets now than hatchlings. And still, we make space, we make food, we sing lullabies and hold to our breasts till they go winging off again. This is Liz Garten Scanlon with Typewriter Rodeo, and you're listening to the Texas Standard.
You can hear the Typewriter Rodeo every Friday here on the Standard. Got a suggestion for a custom poem? You know what to do, send it over. You just might hear it on the radio. But now it's time for the weekly Wise in Texas Politics. Jasper Scherer is politics editor for the Texas Tribune. Jasper, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Well, some big news this week out of Corpus Christi. It would appear that they may have got a break on their looming water crisis. They've been worried the water resources are so low they'll have to declare a water emergency by September. And that would be a pretty huge crackdown on everyday water use. So what's changed?
So what's changed is that threshold for an emergency was pushed back to December. So, and the emergency basically means, that's the point when water demand is 6 months out from exceeding supply. So that basically pushes that point back, that ETA, from March to June 2027. So just a little bit more of a respite, but still a major crisis of pretty epic proportions for Corpus.
Yeah. I want to shift gears and take a look at some more immediate political news. I'll just read the headline for this and we can unpack it. Trump endorses Ken Paxton in Senate GOP runoff. Big news indeed. In fact, it was a national story. What did you make of this news when it came out earlier this week?
Well, one thing I made of it was that I was just surprised that it came at all, just given how long Trump had been teasing it and sort of pushing it off like a reporter telling his editor he's about to file that story. But no, it's, I think Trump was mentioning how Cornyn was, not nearly as loyal to him as Paxton has been, and that, just kind of underscores that Trump demands, full loyalty from the folks that he endorses, and that could be some of Cornyn's past doubts that he's cast about Trump and his electability are kind of coming back to bite him down the home stretch here.
Yeah, but Cornyn's been in that position for 17 years or something. It's been a long time. He's been in office as U.S. Senator from Texas. I'm wondering how dispositive this endorsement is.
There are some folks who are treating it as kind of the death blow for him, and I think there's some justification for that, just given that the polls, by all accounts, we're seeing it. The race was either tied or close to tied. This could be sort of the straw that breaks the camel's back. But at the same time, Cornyn's not thrown in the towel or canceling his campaign. So he's running through the finish line just to see if maybe there are just enough GOP voters out there who aren't hanging on Trump's every word about who they should support. So still should be an interesting election night.
Yeah, quick reminder that today is the last day for early voting in the primary runoffs, and you can get up to speed on all that matters over at TexasTribune.org. That's where Jasper Scherer is politics editor. Jasper, have a great weekend. Stay dry.
You too, David. Thanks.
And you are listening to the Texas Standard.
Texas voters are headed back to the polls. I'm Wells Dunbar with the Texas Standard, and chances are, if you're listening, you know, early voting ends today, Friday, in this year's primary runoff elections, the lowest of the low turnout contests that decide who will ultimately hold power in Texas politics. We asked Texans what's motivating them to vote this time around.
That Donald Trump has thrown his support behind Ken Paxton is shocking, but not surprising.
Carol Hawkins is referring to the high-profile Republican Senate showdown between Attorney General Ken Paxton and incumbent Senator John Cornyn, a race that's largely sucked the oxygen out of the runoff, along with Trump's 11th-hour decision after early voting had already begun to throw his support behind the Attorney General. Hawkins says this election feels different.
This voter who voted Republican more than Democrat over the years is disgusted.
But across Texas, there are also heated runoff races for Congress, the legislature, and local offices. Contests divided sharply along party lines and likely to shape the tone of November's elections. Runoff elections in Texas typically draw far fewer voters than November, but that can mean a relatively small number of people end up having an outsized influence over who advances. Basically, whoever can swing by a Randall's in late May, cast a ballot, and still make it home with a rotisserie chicken, that's the person helping chart the course of Texas politics.
This is Jess Monroe from Fredericksburg, Texas. I went and voted in the Democratic runoff election today because it's more important than ever to participate in our democratic process with our democracy under attack.
And some Texans are trying to keep the focus less on party and more on participation itself. I shared this quote earlier in the week, and it bears repeating. Tyler Malloy wrote to us, "Both parties have candidates that are in runoff elections. Your voice matters. Quality Texans vote in every election." Election day is Tuesday, May 26th, and the midterms fall on November 3rd. Quality Texans do vote in every election, but that's not the full extent of their duties. What else did they do? Well, you've got until November to figure that out. I'm Wells Dunbar, and this is the Talk of Texas.
Wells Dunbar monitoring the talk of Texas. You know, I think earlier I mentioned John Cornyn's been in office for a long time, not 17 years, more like 23 years. But whether he'll be able to run for a fifth term, well, he's facing a serious challenge from Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, as you likely know. On Tuesday, step 2, the primary runoffs. Ready or not, we'll get you up to speed on what you need to know if you haven't voted early and get caught up on what else is making news in the Lone Star State. That's all coming up on the Memorial Day edition of the Texas Standard. We certainly do hope you can join us. Till then, I'm David Brown along with the rest of the Texas Standard team, wishing you a wonderful weekend.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.
Of the next fresh air. At the end of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert's Long Run, we feature our interview with Colbert, recorded soon after the show started. Also, we listen back to an interview with former Congressman Barney Frank, the first gay member of the House to come out. He died Tuesday at the age of 86. Join us.
You can listen to Fresh Air tonight at 8 o'clock.
Houston Public Media is licensed to the University of Houston System, governed by the UH Board of Regents. Information about open meetings, dates, times, and locations is online at uhsystem.edu.
Good morning, I'm Tom Carter. We have a flood watch in effect until Monday at 7 p.m. Otherwise, today, a high near 86, periods of clouds and sunshine, 50% chance of rain, 83, and this is your NPR station. KUHF Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Welcome to the best of Hello Houston. I'm executive producer Jim Kovacic, and I'm also your guide for today's show featuring the best conversations and interviews from our show, Hello Houston. Coming up this hour on the best of Hello Houston, Mayor John Whitmire stops by to discuss his proposal for the city budget. And then we'll talk to Performing Arts Houston's Meg Booth and Lee Strickland about their upcoming 2026-2027 season. And just a quick reminder, you can always listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. You can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this best of program, please let us know by texting at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo is spreading rapidly, according to the World Health Organization. As NPR's Jonathan Lambert reports, there are now more than 800 suspected and confirmed cases and at least 177 deaths.
Despite being declared only 1 week ago, this Ebola outbreak has already become the third largest on record. The WHO says the risk outside of the region is low, but high in Central Africa. There is some good news. On Friday, WHO officials said that there have been no new cases reported in neighboring Uganda after the two that popped up last weekend. As the virus spreads in northeastern DRC, response teams are scrambling to contain the outbreak. There are no approved vaccines or treatments for this particular species of Ebola, so basic public health measures like contact tracing are key. WHO officials say that over 1,400 contacts of suspected cases have been notified and are being tracked for any signs of illness. Jonathan Lambert, NPR News.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio says there's, quote, slight progress in peace talks with Iran. This amid uncertainty over whether the U.S. is ready to war in Iran. It's now its third month and will continue. And he says serious talks are underway. Speaking ahead of the foreign ministers meeting in Sweden, he says the Strait of Hormuz is a main issue.
We have to start thinking about what besides, we know we can't the second issue is that this situation doesn't ways that someone's going to have to do something about it. They're not just going to walk through the streets in that scenario. So we have to start thinking about it.
Speaking ahead of that meeting, that NATO meeting where the strait is expected to be a main topic. Lawyers for a DACA recipient being held in federal immigration detention in Arizona say she could be released today on a $1,500 bond. From Arizona Public Media in Tucson, Angela Gervasi reports that her case is one of a growing number of DACA detentions.
ICE arrested 261 DACA recipients in the first 9 months of the Trump administration, according to the Department of Homeland Security. And the practice hasn't stopped. Federal agents detained Carla Toledo, a 31-year-old Tucson resident, on May 18th. Toledo's family says she's a DACA recipient who's lived in the U.S. since she was 8 years old. A year ago, and trust reporters after her arrest.
She's had DACA for over a decade, so the targeting of Ms. Toledo and other DACA recipients is horrible.
DACA provides certain legal protections for immigrants who arrive to the U.S. as children, but in addition to making arrests, DHS has encouraged recipients to self-deport. Angela Gervasi, NPR News, Tucson.
Wall Street's trading higher. You're listening to NPR News from Washington.
From News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Matt Hara. Today is the last day of early voting for the Texas primary runoff elections. Election day is coming up on Tuesday of next week. Senator John Cornyn made his final Houston campaign swing in his bid to retain his U.S. Senate seat. Our political reporter Andrew Schneider says Cornyn's visit followed Houston area stops by his GOP opponent, Attorney General Ken Paxton, earlier this week.
Cornyn told the Houston Association of Realtors Thursday morning that he remains the Republicans' best chance to beat Democratic State Representative James Talarico in the general election. endorsed Paxton over Cornyn on Tuesday. I'm Andrew Schneider, News 88.7.
The average price of regular gas in Houston is still right at $4 a gallon as we enter the holiday weekend. Tourism industry leaders say they haven't seen much of an impact on travel plans.
People start planning their, holiday road trips long before they know what the prices of the pump are going to be.
Harris County Sheriff Ed Gonzalez says officers will be out in full force this Memorial Day weekend. And FEMA's new floodplain map could have wide-reaching implications for development in Houston once it's finalized. Speaking at a recent Baker Institute conference about the new map, Fletcher Dunson, the president of Sprint Sand and Clay, says developers are grappling with how to build in Houston to avoid flood risks.
I think that's been one of the moving targets for everybody for a long time.
FEMA released its draft floodplain map earlier this year. For more news, you can head to our website. That, of course, is HoustonPublicMedia.org. I'm Matt Harrell, News 88.7.
Houston Public Media is a service of the University of Houston and is supported with your gifts to the Houston Public Media Foundation. More information available online at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate.
Live from Houston Public Media and News 88.7, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Hello Houston.
And we are with you today. I'm Marie Manu. Sitting in with me is the wonderful Catherine Shulka. Hello. It was good. We had you here yesterday. We have you back here again today.
I'm so excited to be here with both of y'all, honestly. This is such a
Who is she
pleasure.
referring to? Well, we usually go into the headlines. We chit-chat what's happening. An important guest with us today, so we're going to get right into it. Last week, Houston Mayor John Whitmire unveiled a proposed budget for the next fiscal year, which is a way to help the city avoid a major financial shortfall. To tell us more about this budget and what it will actually accomplish, we welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here now.
And if you'd like to visit the mayor, it's easy to do. 713-440-8870. Call or text us or email your questions at talk@hellohouston.com. All right, Mr. Mayor, let's start right off. A lot of attention has been brought to this. The first thing everyone thinks about when they hear about this budget is the garbage fund.
First thing it's an administrative fee. $5 is administrative fee. Partly required by the state if you're going to make a city service or utility. You must charge them for that service. Solid waste. Also, it's been recommended because a lot of misinformation. And I think one editorial said correctly that this is a small piece of the financial foundation that we're building. Mostly it's a consolidation of solid waste in the public works. But it was until it matters. It's been steadily downhill. And it's one of our challenges. Actually, it's improved greatly when we changed directors about 4 months ago. But it still needs some more efficiencies. There's a lot of issues from the past, like we have 5 transfer stations, only 2 of them work. The recycling transaction is handled by a group out of Spain that was difficult to comments about solid waste. Public Works is already over there working.
Mm-hmm.
We've got new equipment. We've got a different leadership. Just to give you an example, Wednesday was the day off by the director in solid waste. Unbelievable. That was to create overtime for those that would go ahead and go work. It was a huge conflict of interest. If someone doesn't have the resources to pay the $5, I think they need to speak up. They need to talk to their family, their friends, but, for the service they're getting. Mm-hmm. And we have serious challenges with heavy trash. And, of course, someday we want to be able to eliminate illegal dumping. And this will be a consideration as we go forward. One, we've got to enforce penalties against illegal dumping. HPD is placing video cameras in our neighborhoods that are redundantly suffering from illegal dumping. They're getting license plates. The DA's taking the charges. So there are a lot of moving parts. But the financial, I'm sorry if someone can't afford the $5.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask this.
But their service is not going to be denied, of course.
And, of course, you understand this much better than I do. You've been knee-deep in it for a bit now. You move this service over, and we have the $5 fee. Yeah. The $5 fee, as you're saying, and as we've heard, doesn't cover the actual cost of it. It's not a cost onto the person for the service they're getting, but the fee there.
Sure.
How then and is it water that then takes on this responsibility in their department? How does that money then get paid? How do
the water
they
fund is sitting on $1.3 billion.
Okay.
Due to the consent agreement with the federal government. And the water rate increases 7% April 1st, long before I got there. So that fund continues to grow and grow. There is a resource, a fund already paid for by citizens of Houston, and we're going to put it to good use. It does not endanger the fund. It's growing. It doesn't interfere with any ongoing projects. We've taken all this in consideration. Let me just tell you, do you really think I'd have the support for this budget across Houston, diverse entities and organizations, if it wasn't sound and financial secure?
Well, I will say one of the criticism about it is that some folks feel like they don't know the full picture, and that's why you're here today. So that's what we're giving.
It's complex.
Help us understand.
We've had 80 briefings. We were at AFL-CIO last night. Over 80. I got 13 council members that have been briefed, stood with me in support. Mm-hmm. The critics are the ones that can't get over the last election. And they don't like anything I do. Name me one thing that some of our critics think I do. We're paving 1,000 roads this year. $500 million for drainage, the most ever. Our HPD personnel, all-time high, 5,400 police officers, 800 new since I got sworn in. Fire the same way, 600 new firefighters. Response times for those departments has never been better. Morale's never been better. So Houstonians sense that we're going in the right direction. Critics are critics. I understand. I've been at this a long time, but it's just unfortunate that they play with people's lives on sound financial footing. And so any increases in the administrative fee, if we want to move into calling it a garbage fee, will be voted on by council. So there's safeguards there.
The administrative fee will stay at $5, and that if an increase came, that would be a garbage fee on top of it. Am I understanding you correctly?
I'm very transparent. There is no question that the $5 is administrative fee, short of what the study that people like to refer to recommended. I'm sensitive to the dilemma that you mentioned. Some people just won't have $5. So we kept it at $5 and not to $6.50. The actual cost, now, Mr. Hollins would say, no, it's $35 and $40. He didn't read the report. The report says with the efficiencies that we've already taken, the actual cost of service is about $24. Council will have to decide going forward, does it make sense? Have we improved the service to the degree that we could ask for a garbage fee? That'll be determined by Houstonians.
And I know folks are concerned about the improvement of service. So what do you have planned to improve that, and how does that come along if it's just a $5 service fee or administrative fee right now? How are we improving garbage trash pickup without incurring more cost?
Well, it's already improved. partly with a new director. I kept the previous director, and he fooled me. I thought he was genuine. I would ride the streets with him, and he says, and there would be a pile, and he said, oh, well, that's been there, just got there because there's no grass growing around it. I mean, I was listening to the guy, but soon I realized he was not the real deal. So we brought in Mr. Hassan. He's making a difference. The city bought used trucks before I got there. They stayed in the shop. So now we have new trucks, new director, and Public Works is a can-do operation. Randy Maka, the director, is the one fixing all the drainage and all the streets, and they've already started working together. Public Works has resources, trucks, and other resources. So there is already a noticeable difference. And could I have gone ahead forward? It would have been a challenge because we need to consolidate them and do these transactions that even you won't focus on. It's to make the solid waste a utility, which it is in all the other major cities, and we will charge them 5% of their gross revenue of the water fund to go, and that wipes out the $104 million shortfall. And then when you start charging a right-of-way fee to the utilities, just like you do Comcast or other AT&T, we will raise other monies, $100 million, to wipe out the shortfall.
Last thing on this before we take a quick break, I'm just curious, is there opportunity for you and the comptroller to meet and talk on this thing? Is that how
I've tried to help him
works?
to learn how to govern. He hired the city financial director on a Friday before I was sworn in on Monday. That's a gentleman that is so familiar with city finances. We've networked with him. We've talked with him. But, somebody's got to want to learn how to govern to be able to talk. I have no personal ill will. He was in the mayor's race for about 2 months before he got out, and I know he's unhappy. But I will help the citizens of Houston by working with anyone across the aisle, within my party, within City Hall. I just ran to fix things. That's the only reason I'm here. I was not looking for this job. I'm not trying to start a political career. I've had a distinguished political career. Houstonians asked me to come back and run for mayor. It was a tough decision, very tough. I was getting things done in the Senate. Last session, I created a funding mechanism from the state to double the size of the George Brown Convention Center. If you haven't seen it, you need to drive by. Moved murder cases to the front of the backlog at the county. So we were getting things done, but I grew up in Houston. The streets and infrastructure doesn't have to be in this shape. Public safety does not have to be such a concern of Houstonians. And we're moving in the right direction. I not only feel it as a Houstonian, I hear it when I go out in public.
Let me ask you this. We focus a lot on this $5 administrative fee, and it seems like everyone's talking about that when they talk about your budget. What do you think are the points that we should also be looking at in this budget that help the city and your constituents understand what is in this and why it's the right move?
Well, it's the foundation of going forward. We're taking care of the shortfall, not cutting services. And we haven't even talked about the Parks Department or all the other health department and all the other needs of the state. The $5 fee, administrative fee, to help with this transition will wipe out $104 million of the $209 million shortfall, because we're going to make the utilities pay a right-of-way fee. San Antonio, and we're only doing it at 5% of their gross, which generates that $104 million. San Antonio charges their power and water 14%. Dallas, 20% of water. Austin, 12% energy, water, 8%. They all do it, and it is a major revenue source that the Houston, certainly when they came under the revenue cap, should have looked at this as a viable option. We're charging 5% of the combined water utility, and the fund is not jeopardized. $1.3 billion has been paid by Houstonians. We're busy fixing the infrastructure. We're going to replace the Eastside Water Plant, which is $5 billion. We're getting cooperation from the state in Washington to do that. And then making solid waste part of the enterprise fund, we will charge them a right-of-way fee, and that wipes out $116 million in savings. So what we've done without raising property taxes, balance our budget, we haven't laid off anyone, and the services are improving through efficiencies of the Ernst & Young report. Mm-hmm. So, you know, these are tough calls. Tough calls. They're too tough to be politicized. There's going to be a time to campaign. But right now, let's just all come together, use the same data, and reach what is an honest conclusion. But this is not my proposal. Obviously, you know, I'm the mayor. I'm the CEO. I'll be held accountable. But this is coming together of many, many hours of research, recommendations, council members. Sally Alcorn, one of our outstanding councilmen, chairman of finance, is supporting it. So, you know, I think it's fair to say, why such support if it's flawed? It's not perfect, but it's transparent. We've built a coalition, and it'll only get better.
Are there areas where you feel personally you could have been more aggressive, but taking into consideration all of this information, you have settled where you have?
Well, we can always do better, but I'm working many days, 18 hours. I have outstanding department heads. There's 24 department heads. If you ask me what I'm most proud of, it's the team I've put in place. Mm-hmm. They're passionate, they're honest, they're efficient, and so across the city, we have excellent leadership in the departments. I've had to adjust several had forgotten what their purpose was, is to improve Houston's lives. Could I have done better? We've been in 80 different briefings. We briefed each and every council member. We had a very transparent press conference. I will take responsibility for the proposal. It should have been done. never functioned well, the bike lanes. They were two in opposite directions. That's a one-way street. So it was a danger. So while we were repairing the road, bike lanes were taken up. The little stretch from Heights Boulevard was done much to my surprise because the armadillos were coming up. And they leave about a 2-inch bolt on the street. So public works went out there and they were in such bad condition. But ma'am, I'm under pressure and I resisted repair, take up bike lanes, Lodge and 11th Street across the city. But I resisted because we're doing an intense, detailed study. Fire and police literally cannot go down some streets because of the bike lanes. We will do everything we can to assist the bikers. It's a part of our life. Allen Parkway, the Bio Partnership, we're establishing north and south connections, but we don't have a bike removal program. Certainly, I sit here today and I can't think of a location where they've been removed. It's a beautiful day. I would hope people would use them, but that's part of the criticism. They just look sad. But, you know, mobility options for mobility are important in the city of Houston. I appreciate your question, but it's not a major cause because we're not doing it.
Thank you, Sally, for that. Question came in on our YouTube channel. What's the main thing about high-speed rail in the Texas truck?
Sure, we've been built in 1988. We carried legislation to try to minimize their ability to
say I've asked this question to you folks before, but I'm curious, is there a story that the season tells? Is there something you're trying to say with what you've put together and how you've put it together that goes beyond just a bunch of performances?
That's a difficult question to answer. With more than 38, 40 different artists, not every single one is going to speak to the same. There is a theme for the 60th anniversary year of Dreaming. And if you think about where our organization was, where Houston was 60 years ago, that are stronger today than ever been in our 60-year history, we are realizing the dream of the organization put together in 1966 as John School was opening. Many of the pieces, the Joffrey Ballet, their mix is the dreamscape. There are many programs on the season that are dreamscapes, but over and above that, there are so many different themes. We have an extraordinary theme of global music, music from many different continents. One of the music stories that I love the most, and Lee, you should talk about this, is a festival that he has put together about an American art form, bluegrass, which has traveled throughout an international diaspora. And so we're bringing in American bluegrass artists, Korean bluegrass artist, and then a Irish bluegrass band. And we're going back to Miller Theater, so it's free, a whole day that kind of shows how an American art form has traveled through the diaspora.
You talked a lot about commissioning Houston artists. I'm curious to inform getting in on the ground floor saying, I want to help you create this. And so, we may help work on any number of things, lighting, designers, stage management, production photos, press photos. There's any number of things that need to be worked on in the creation space. And it's a much longer engagement with that artist to say, we're going to be with you from inception all the way to when the curtain finally goes up on this piece.
I want to go back to Meow Meow, and Lee, I'll let you take this to explain to Michael, because we were going through there. I said, oh, Meow Meow. And he's like, what is that?
I'm like, I don't know Meow Meow.
Okay, Meow Meow. Several years ago, I was introduced to her and immediately fell in love with her. She's Australian cabaret performer, but takes on almost a persona of pre-World War II German cabaret.
Okay.
I had spoken with Meg for a long time about her, and then finally, several years ago, she was doing a midnight show in New York, and I was like, okay, we're staying up, we're going to go to the show, and it's going to blow your mind.
It was awesome.
As soon as we did, she was like, okay, we have to figure out how to bring her here. I mean, it's a mix of comedy, but also she does rich storytelling, and she has an amazing voice. She's recorded with Pink Martini. She sings in multiple languages. languages. She's just truly an amazing artist.
Like one of a kind, it sounds like.
Yeah.
How would you characterize, we only have about a minute and a half left, but what Houston shows, are they different, do you feel, than the international shows that you guys curate? Or is it like, does Houston have its own singular sort of art form that you're like, that's a Houston show? Does that make sense?
Yes, although what I would say is what makes Houston so special is our plurality and that so many different cultures can exist and we can come together to celebrate difference together. So I think that's Houston's story. Not that we're homogenous in any way, but that we are plural and that we can create spaces where we can enjoy that and learn about somebody else's differences.
Yeah. We've mentioned Meow Meow. I also want to mention some names you may be more familiar with are going to be in the season. Ira Glass, Alton Brown, and David Sedaris is coming back. Good friend of ours here in Houston. For folks to find out everything else that's in your season, because we barely scratched the surface, where can they go to find out more?
PerformingArtsHouston.org, or they can call me directly if they want to at 713-632-8144.
Dangerous.
I was like, wow, you're brave. Thank you both very much for coming, and we look forward to the new season launching. It's the first piece of the new season.
The first piece is August 7th, and that is with Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman. Matt Booth is the president and CEO of Performing Arts Houston. Lisa Strickland is the director of artistic
I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. You can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. This is News 88.7.
Houston Matters wants to hear from you about story or guest ideas for future programs, or pet care or gardening questions you'd like us to tackle when those subjects come up each month on the show. Or maybe you have suggestions for how we can improve the program and provide a better public service. Reach out anytime at talk@houstonmatters.org. I'm Craig Cohen. Join us for the next Houston Matters, weekday mornings at 9 here on News 88.7.
Can't get enough PBS programming? PBS Passport is an added member benefit that offers exclusive streaming access to many of your favorite programs on the PBS app. Whether you're an NPR listener, a PBS watcher, or both, your ongoing donations of at least $5 per month qualify for PBS Passport. Make your gift now to start watching at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate.
HPM Plus brings you the latest news and information from around the world and across the street. Trusted journalists delivering facts, fairness, and perspective. Keeping you connected by keeping you informed. PBS NewsHour, Frontline, and documentaries that provide a voice to the voiceless. Stream live, engage on demand, and enjoy past seasons through PBS Passport. Search HPM Plus on your smart and connected TVs and stay informed.
Here and Now brings you the latest news from around the country.
I have a life brimming with people who've made different choices, and I've never tried in my personal life to impose my choices on them.
Seems to me that people are being responsible, and yet it keeps spreading.
I've been door knocking and making phone calls and working in offices. I'm willing to do anything for this man.
Hear the latest news as it develops on the next Here and Now from NPR News.
Here and Now,
every Monday through Thursday, 1 p.m. on News 88.7.
Support comes from the Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, offering comprehensive cancer care that is compassionate, personalized, and driven by clinical research. More at stlukeshealth.org/cancer.
I'm Tom Carter. Good morning, 11:59, and we have a flood watch in effect until 7 p.m. on Monday. Otherwise, a 50% chance of showers or maybe a thunderstorm today, the high 86. It's 85. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Welcome to the Best of Hello Houston. I'm executive producer Jim Kovacic, and I'm also your guide for today's show featuring the best conversations and interviews from our show, Hello Houston. Coming up this hour in the Best of Hello Houston, City Controller Chris Holland stops by to discuss Mayor John Whitmire's proposal for the city budget. Then the Texas Water Association's Cheryl Kirkle will talk about a possible Texas water crisis. And finally, President and CEO of the Houston-based homeless shelter Star of Hope, Doug Meikle, will tell us about their mission. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this Best of program, please let us know by texting at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, by Metro, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. President Trump swore in the new Fed chair, Kevin Warsh, this morning. The 56-year-old succeeds Jerome Powell, who served as chair for 8 years and was appointed by President Trump in his first term. But he was also a frequent target of Trump for not lowering interest rates quickly or deeply enough.
Kevin has spoken often about the need to restore the Fed's integrity by returning to a proper focus on its two functional and really fundamental responsibilities: maintaining price stability and low inflation and achieving full employment.
Warsh is the first Fed chair to be sworn in at the White House since Alan Greenspan in 1987. He says he will lead a reform-oriented Fed, learning from past mistakes and successes. Powell will stay as a member of the Fed's Board of Governors. Senate Republicans confirmed Warsh just ahead of Powell's departure from the top job. Secretary of State Marco Rubio says there's still more work to do to reach a deal with Iran. President Trump has been threatening more military action if a deal can't be reached, as NPR's Michelle Kellerman reports.
After meeting NATO counterparts in Sweden, Secretary Rubio was asked about the prospects of a deal with Iran. He says the goal is an agreement that covers Iran's nuclear program and reopens the Strait of Hormuz.
But we also have to have a plan B. And plan B is, what if Iran refuses to open the straits? What if Iran decides we refuse to open the straits, we're going to own the straits, and we're going to charge tolls for it? Okay, at that point, something has to be done about it.
And he says this affects Europe more than the U.S. Rubio repeated his frustration that a few NATO allies did not let the U.S. use bases to launch the war against Iran. The Strait of Hormuz was operating normally before the war. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
In California, regulators voted this week to take the first step toward banning a popular material that's used to make countertops. From member station KQED, Farida Jablova Romero reports that the material is linked to a surging lung disease called silicosis.
Stonecutters who had lung transplants, as well as multiple doctors, urged the Occupational Safety and Health Standards Board to prohibit the use of artificial stone. Hundreds of workers in several states are ill. 31 have died in California in recent years from inhaling toxic silica dust generated by the factory-made material when it's cut. Board member Derek Irwin.
We have to take effective action to prevent further cases now.
It could now take months for Cal OSHA to develop a rule prohibiting the fabrication of artificial stone with more than 1% crystalline silica. For NPR News, I'm Farida Javala Romero in Oakland, California.
And you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Gail Lauder. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo won't stop the country's soccer team from coming to Houston for the World Cup. AP reports the team is moving forward with a Houston base camp. The team's players and coaches are based outside Congo, but they did cancel a fan send-off amid the outbreak. A new study on rain events could help reduce the risk of flooding in the state's urban areas. Texas Public Radio's Jerry Clayton has more.
The Texas A&M Urban Flood Study found that cities can actually change the weather, depending on the type of weather event. Researchers looked at individual storm events in DFW, Austin, Houston, and San Antonio, and found that cityscapes could make some storms more intense. Dr. John Nielsen Gammon is a Texas A&M University atmospheric scientist and co-author of the study. He says the most dangerous types of urban storms are ones similar to the May 2025 San Antonio flood, which killed 13 people.
That sort of rainfall runs off quickly and can potentially overwhelm sewer systems and urban creeks and streams and culverts.
Cities can create what are referred to as urban heat islands, which cause
seaweed on Galveston's beaches. Federal guidelines require seaweed to reach a certain threshold before crews can get rid of it. Chris Stanley is with the Galveston Report.
Different areas up to it and different structures of beach. It does take several days for us to be able to use it out. For the past 2 days, it will be
Stanley says these crews come and go ahead to do the cleanup. The Astros play the Cubs in Chicago this afternoon. Start pitches at 1:20. There's a flood watch ahead of possible severe weather this weekend. Flood watch will end until 7 o'clock Monday night. I'm Kate Together, presenting 8-7.
Houston Public Media is licensed to the University of Houston System, governed by the UH Board of Regents. Information about open meetings, dates, times, and locations is online at uhsystem.edu.
And now back to Hello Houston. Coming up today's topics, call our text 713-440-8870. Email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now Ernie Manous and guest host Michael Atkinson.
Okay, last week, Houston Mayor John Whitmire unveiled his proposed budget for the next fiscal year, pitching it as, quote, a way to help the city avoid a major financial shortfall. But not everyone's on board with this plan. Joining us now is Houston City Controller Chris Evans, who expressed concerns about the proposal and what it could mean for taxpayers and city services. Controller Evans, welcome back to the program. If you'd like to join the conversation, call us 713-440-8870. We've talked about this topic a bit. We've come back and forth around it. The first thing that stands out to me, and maybe I'm missing something, it seems like all of his eggs, the mayor's eggs, are in this basket of this trash fee. And I've got a lot of concern about if someone doesn't pay him when it comes to the trash, all of that, ins and outs. Does the trash fee alone that he is proposing, $5 a month initially, maybe moving up to $25 over time, does that generate enough revenue to do all that you need to accomplish?
It doesn't, not even close. And so I would describe this all the eggs being in that basket because, man, that's a really small basket. The $5 trash fee is only going to generate, in a perfect scenario, about $24 million. Now, the cost of solid waste today is closer to $120 million. And it's only going to go up over time. And so this fee doesn't even get close to actually paying for solid waste. And the mayor's plan, where I think most of the eggs are, is draining the water fund to pay for trash. And then separately, draining the water fund even further to pay for police and firefighters with a transfer from water over to the general fund. Now, I know I just said a lot.
I'm trying to get it all in. Yeah.
So we have a trash fee that's a new cost for Houstonians, but it doesn't improve the service, nor does it actually cover the cost of the service. It's really being funded with water money. And then number two is there's an additional transfer on top of paying for trash that's going over to the general fund to the tune of $104 million. That's going to pay for things that you thought you were already paying for with your property taxes. And so what we're seeing is a repeated trend of draining fund after fund. First we got the Metro, we cut off the Metro Next plan, drained down tens of millions of dollars to pay for traffic cops and street lights. Then we went over to the general fund, ran up the two largest deficits in city history in the last 2 years. And now we're going after the water money. Money that's supposed to be going towards fixing all these leaky pipes. Money that's supposed available online virtually as well, to hear a more in-depth description of what's going on in the budget and to ask questions and get real answers to those questions.
We have Mayor coming on the show on Thursday to talk about this also. What questions would you suggest we ask him about this?
Sure. There's a couple questions. So, number one, in our water fund, we're claiming that we have an excess of money that we don't know what to do with. Well, how do we get that money? Did we charge water customers too much? Or did we not invest in infrastructure projects that we were supposed to invest in according to the plan? That's a good question to ask. Question number two is, hey, going forward, are all the water challenges fulfilled at this point? If not, why are we spending this money on trash and on police and on firefighters instead of the water system? The garbage fee. The mayor said last week, hey, we're going to start at $5, and if we're smart, we may never have to increase it past $5. Well, why, Mayor, is the official trash study that just got released last week, why does it say that the cost of serving Houstonians today is about $30 plus per customer? And if you look forward in a few years, it'll be $46. How are we going to manage that on a $5 fee? Those are questions that you might want to ask.
You mentioned police and firefighters, and what I see here is it's $1.2 billion for police, another $700 million for firefighters. We're often talking about these particular people and how they fit into the budget and these increases in salary. Is there a way to find
in water pipes. We pay that in our water bills, right? And what we expect is that when we turn on the taps, clean water comes out. And we also expect that the system will be invested in so that it works for years and years to come. We're not paying that water bill saying, oh, you're going to pay for all of this other stuff up front. That's where transparency comes in. We need to be honest about what this fee is for and then spend it on that. Not, just leave it the damn away and then try to plug these holes with their water bill.
So you have a recommendation as I hear from the recommendation of how to get us to a point where everyone's in a balance and in the right direction. What would your recommendation be from the numbers you see?
Be honest with Houstonians. Decide what our vision is for Houston. Decide the steps that we need to take to achieve that mission. Understand how much it truly costs to get that stuff done. Raise that money. Be straightforward with Houstonians about how much that costs and get them to buy in to that plan.
What would it cost?
Well, the study says that on the low side, getting to 99% on-time trash pickup, which is standard service across the country, is going to take a couple of years, and it's going to cost us, I believe, about $160 million a year, which is a pretty dramatic increase from today. It projects that that's going to be $46 per
Again,
household.
but outside of just trash collection, for
Oh,
the
sure.
city itself to get to a place we need to be at this point, I'm not saying perfectly balanced out, but to be headed in the right direction, what kind of an impact per person would you feel it would take?
I'm going to be honest with you that I don't have that number right this moment. I've been knee-deep in garbage water for the past couple of weeks. But it's something certainly worth thinking about. But we haven't started at step one of what's the vision to begin with. If we had that, then we could price it out. But at this moment, that doesn't even exist.
We don't have a whole lot of time, but I do want to ask this, that, what do you do if you have this plan and it doesn't work out? I'm thinking about Austin that came forward with this capital campaign and the voters rejected it. People don't like to pay more money, even if there are essential needs and services that it would go towards. So what would the solution be, knowing that sometimes it doesn't work out when the voters reject proposals? Does that make sense?
It does. In this instance, I don't believe that it's going to the voters at all. Look, I believe in the concept of democracy, right? And so I think that in our seats, we should be, again, being honest and transparent, sharing what the plan is and the benefits of that plan and the warts and the costs, right? And then saying, this is the best choice for Houston. We want you to buy in, and then getting that approval before moving forward. What we're seeing here is a proposal that in a month's time, we're going to go to City Council for a vote. And after that, that's it. And so if City Council decides there's going to be a garbage fee at whatever amount it is, that's going to be it. There's nothing that's going to the voters for approval here. And so there's not even an opportunity for the kind of rejection that you're speaking of.
And with that, Houston City Controller Chris Hollins, thank you for joining us.
I look forward to coming back and talking about comedy with you.
We'll bring you back.
Coming up on the best of Hello Houston, the Texas Water Association's Sarah Kirkle will talk about a possible Texas water crisis. This is News 88.7.
We know you value Houston Public Media. That's why you're listening right now. Take the next steps and become a new member of the station you rely on. Every gift makes a difference, and what matters most right now is supporting the station that brings you the news and information you rely on. It only takes a few minutes to make a big difference. Join as a new member today at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
Doom scrolling. Let's break that habit, folks. I'm Aisha Roscoe, host of Weekend Edition Sunday, where if you want to know what's going on in the world and why it matters, all you have to do is give your thumb a rest and perk up your ears. We've got the news, but we've also got curiosity, joy, and surprise. Tune in for Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Weekend Edition, Saturdays and Sundays from 7 to 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
double previous estimates as population growth, drought, and aging infrastructure strain supplies. And in some places, that future may already be here. Corpus Christi's water crisis has made headlines in recent months, with local reservoirs at critically low levels. Joining us now to help us understand all of this is Sarah Kirkle, Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Texas Water Association. Sarah, welcome to Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
And if you would like to join the conversation, give us a call or text at 713-440-8870. Sarah, you know, when we were listing off those three crises that are, being faced by the communities, growth of population, drought, and aging infrastructure, I'm curious, what do you see as the biggest concern in what is within our power to respond to?
Well, when I think about the biggest concern, it really is understanding what the problems are and how we got where we are. And so, as you mentioned, if you're talking about health and you've experienced, especially in Houston, a lot of flood crises, and drought is really taking it over. You really see the ground actually shift and break, and that can cause damage to infrastructure. And then any development that goes along with that population growth, it has really been driving our need for additional water infrastructure in a way that is, in some cases, outpacing our ability to create the water supply to provide for them. So because our water supply can sometimes take decades to get in place, this really fast development has been creating kind of a mismatch between the needs and our ability to provide the infrastructure in a timely manner. But I think all of this is happening against a backdrop that is that all of our cheap, easy water projects have already been developed. So for a lot of communities, they are already using up their local supply. And so in order to meet the growth needs, they've got to go further out. And when you don't have that local water, that means pipelines that are going further, which adds costs. And it's also using water sources that maybe are a little bit more expensive to treat. So when you're talking about desalination, either of seawater or brackish groundwater, these treatment methods are they're a lot more technically advanced, and they're just a lot more expensive.
How close are we actually, though, to that tipping point where we are in the crisis moment, where the water just isn't there?
I don't know that we're necessarily at the tipping point. Certainly, Corpus Christi leads us to believe we've really got to take action. I hope that communities around the state are taking note of what's happening there and making sure that they implement their plans. We have a local water planning process that feeds up into our state water plan. It does provide our local folks with an ability to move those projects forward, but it's important to take this seriously. The cost increases are really the biggest barrier that we're seeing to implementation of water projects. In fact, during the Water Development Board meeting where they approved the most recent state water plan draft, they turned down $2.9 billion in state water plan projects because we don't have enough financial capacity to help move them forward. And I'm not talking about grants, I'm talking about subsidized loans. And so you have all these water projects that are in line, waiting to get started or waiting to go to the next step. And we just don't have the financial capacity to be able to help them move along. And ultimately, what that's going to mean is that the costs are going to go up as we continue to delay the projects, and it's going to delay the timelines for getting water supply to some of these communities.
And I guess I ask about the tipping point because I'm wondering if we take heed and do what needs to be done starting today, have we acted fast enough?
I think in some parts of the state, the answer is yes. You can start today and be fine. For other parts of the state, we do have plans in place, and the most important thing that we can do is not delay those projects, which is why moving those water plan projects forward is really important. I mean, if you think about the cost increases that we've experienced just from before COVID, those projects have gone up 2 to 3 times. And we all know inflation is impacting every part of our lives, but in water, it's really having a much larger impact because you have the impacts of specific tariffs, and the inflation rate for the types of materials used in water projects is just that much more expensive. And so if you kick these cans down the road and you don't take care of your issues, it's really going to come first. So I do think that the water managers in Texas understand this. They're planning, for some of them, the uncertainty of which projects are going to move forward is something that is very difficult. So during the last legislative session, for example, we had bills and conversations against
responsibility in addressing the water crisis? Is it a community effort? Is it a local-led effort? Or is it just everybody has a hand to play in this conversation?
There's a couple of components. I think ultimately water in Texas is still driven at the local and regional level. Corpus Christi is a regional water provider. I think they had plans for this desalination plant in the state water plan. They were continuing to plan and move forward for that. And then when the city council decided not to move forward with that, I think it was very surprising to folks. I do think that the state has a role there in terms of providing the financing. So if the financing isn't available, then certainly the state has a role. But the local governments and those regional providers are really who are driving these conversations. And sometimes they have a challenging role with the community. I mean, water is not super sexy. And so in this, discussion about Corpus Christi, there have been a lot of conversations about the role of, the 2-year election cycle. And, maybe it's not the sexiest thing to talk about water and water rates, as opposed to a new library or a new park. Nobody wants a wastewater plant necessarily named after them, right? And so that in combination with water being somewhat of an invisible problem where as long as the taps are turning on and the toilets are flushing, sometimes people think that it's not a problem. And so water folks are sometimes a victim of their own success, but we have to be mindful that given the growth and the long timelines for us to get water projects online, it's really important that we're diligent about moving forward.
You talk about water not being that sexy of a political topic. It's so interesting to me as we talk about the water crisis and the images that come to mind as we unpack that. And one of the things that really sticks out to me is just it sounds so antiquated. It sounds like what you see in a Western that takes place, 150, 200 years ago. And yet this is a very real problem that Texans are currently facing or could face in the not so distant future. What does that say to you about sort of the precedent for this and where we are now in 2026 and we're talking about not having enough water potentially?
Yeah, it tells me that we, in many ways, are not valuing water in its true meaning. I mean, we don't blink twice at a $150 smartphone bill, but when it comes to increasing water rates, it's something that people sometimes will bristle at. And so people have taken water for granted for so long that I think it's going to be a real turning point when we have now paid off largely, and this is not the case everywhere, many of our communities have paid off their local infrastructure. And so when they start taking on these bigger projects that are going to mean very large rate increases in order to pass, it's going to be a real test of how much people value their water. I think it's also going to start having impacts on people's use. So I think there are probably going to we're going to need some very large projects in order to get water to some of those really thirsty areas that drive the economic engine of the state. But at some point, that those rate increases are going to get to a place where normal people are going to see those increases and say, well, maybe I'm going to adjust my behavior. Maybe I'm not going to water outside as much. I mean, there are communities in Central Texas where 65 to 80% of the water use is treated drinking water dumped on the ground to water their plants. And so we've got to have a new relationship with water as we move forward. And I think that's one thing that you're seeing with these very large cost increases is a shift to that in that conversation to conservation and reuse, which has been a part of the solution all the time. But in this next water plan, people are counting on that to make up 43% of our new supply. And back in the day, it used to be a lot cheaper to just go build a new reservoir or go get another water supply instead of fixing the pipes that you already have. And that equation has turned on its head. Now it's super important that our communities are thinking about repairing their lines and making sure that we're having a real conversation about keeping the water that we have because it's the cheapest one that we have.
If you want to talk to Sarah and you have questions about our water crisis, give us a call, 713-440-8870. Over at our YouTube, there's a lot of chat going on, but Chef Rob makes a comment and says citizens should not be punished for mismanagement, which makes me look at this in a different way. Is part of the problem here a lack of proper management, or is it simply a resource and need kind of problem?
I am not aware of any mismanagement of water funds. I really believe that communities, when they understand their needs, they typically will take the actions that they need to move forward. I think it's a matter of massive success of our state growing at a rate that our water supplies just haven't kept pace with.
Okay.
Kind of going off of that, you were mentioning what people can do. I think that a lot of people are going to hear this interview and wonder, is it all up to my city leaders, my state leaders, or is there anything I can do? What can be done just at the individual level that our viewers and our listeners can understand of how they can contribute to helping solve this water crisis?
Yeah, I think that folks can be really mindful about their water use at home, whether that's limiting your outdoor use, whether when you're planting, either new developments or looking at your own yard. St. Augustine, for example, incredibly thirsty. And so that's going to take a lot more water to survive than maybe other types of native plants. And so there are definitely ways to curb your own personal use beyond just getting involved at your local government and making sure to support those water and wastewater services that are going to really determine your community's future.
And, I think that what's interesting at the political level is this is a bipartisan issue. I think you hear Republicans talking about it, you hear Democrats talking about it, and yet here we are talking about a crisis that, yes, there have been investments that lawmakers here in Texas have passed, the water fund. What is it going to take, and are we moving quickly enough as you see it to solve this crisis?
You're absolutely right. This doesn't play out in R&D politics at all. Water really shakes out as, in some ways, it's a rural versus urban in terms of the urban needs and going to the rural areas to get some of those resources. But right now, we're having rural versus rural fights. And, we're having a huge conversation about groundwater management. And that occurs at the very local level at groundwater districts. And there you've got fights of private property rights where you have some who, my private property right means that I get to sell my water and provide that to someone else, and their neighbor may say, well, my private property rights mean I get to conserve my water in place for my future generations. And so that's been something that has really been a new development, seeing some of that even rural versus rural play out.
It seems as though that water planning in Texas tends to be very regional. Is that an error in the way we approach it? Should it be looked at more holistically as an entire statewide or even a region of the country kind of issue as opposed to each community trying to figure it out?
Well, right now, water is still a very local issue. And so I think it will always be, especially at the retail level. But when you're talking big water supply, it is more of a regional conversation. And that's just a matter of cost efficiencies in order to make it more feasible for us to have these projects. But yes, I think local management and regional management is going to get us a long way down the road. I think that there ultimately is going to be the need for the state to pitch in additional dollars in order to get some of these bigger projects done. So there are projects that are likely going to be needed for the bigger urban areas, especially along the I-35 corridor, where there just isn't enough water. And so there will be proposals to move it from areas like East Texas where it rains more. East Texans have not loved that idea. And so that's going to be a political fight that is going to have to work itself out. But I do think you're right that the cost, some of those projects are probably so large that no one entity in Texas, in terms of like a regional water supplier, would be able to undertake on their own. You're going to need to see the state step up in terms of providing some participation in those projects. We have existing mechanisms for that. It's strictly a matter of having enough money. And Texans really, I'm so proud of them for understanding how important water issues are. They overwhelmingly supported Prop 4 last November, and that's going to send $20 billion into our Texas Water Fund. But that's $1 billion a year for 20 years. And we know that our needs are going to be much greater than that. This massive $174 billion number that we're talking about, that's strictly the state water plan. That doesn't have anything to do with the maintenance and repair of your existing infrastructure. It doesn't cover wastewater. It doesn't cover flood infrastructure. And so we have a lot of different needs within the water community that we don't have the funding to address.
713-440-8870 if you have a question for Sarah, as Patricia does from Crosby. Patricia, what's on your mind?
I'm just wondering if you are considering turning sewer water into drinking water.
Thank you for that. What's your thoughts?
Yes, that is very popular right now. We consider that direct reuse, kind of toilet to tap. And so you see that as one of the most common things that's happening right now. Actually, though, I do want to caution that I hear
here's sometimes an over-reliance on this reuse concept, and reusing your water in some cases is absolutely a better way than just letting it go away. But in other times you really are pulling water from other areas. So, for example, we have meetings in the DFW area. There's always a joke, flush twice for Houston, because the drinking water that it becomes wastewater in Dallas is treated. It's put back into the Trinity River. It comes down to Houston. Houston treats it as your drinking water. And so if Dallas were to keep all of their water and to continue reusing it, that's going to have impacts on Houston. And so we've got to have also a more holistic view of how we're reusing our water. So it is absolutely a part of the equation, but it can't be our only equation. At this point, given how dire our water supply needs are in different parts of the state, I do think that all of the different types of projects really need to be on the table.
Quick question from Cliff that comes in from our YouTube chat. Are rainwater collection systems for residential use a viable option?
I think they can be. Right now they aren't at such a large scale that they're having a massive impact. I think if everyone had one, we would possibly see impacts on our surface water. Those surface water right now, when it rains, if it's not collected, it runs into our waterways, and there are water rights, and communities rely on those for their drinking water. So if it got to a massive scale, we could have impacts on our surface water rights and that type of surface water availability. For now, I do think that it can be a really viable way. I know different communities have different restrictions. In Austin, we can only use it for irrigation. And so I have some rainwater tanks. I think they really help offset some of my use for some of that irrigation. Yes, but to a limit, right? And so we just got to watch. If everybody starts doing it, then we might start having other issues.
Sarah, thank you very much.
Sarah Kirkle is the Policy and Legislative Affairs Director at the Texas Water Association. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on Hello Houston.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up on the Best of Hello Houston, the president and CEO of the Houston-based homeless shelter Star of Hope, Doug Meikle, will tell us about their mission. This is News 88.7.
Houston Public Media, in partnership with Texas Southern University, brings to you The Vibe, R&B, hip-hop, and neo-soul, music that resonates with all ages. The Vibe on 88.7 HD3 and on the Houston Public Media app.
Your support for Houston Public Media powers the programs you trust and rely on. And your employer may help your contribution go even further. Many employers sponsor matching gift programs, doubling or even tripling employee contributions. It's an easy way to maximize your impact on the programs you rely on. Search for your company and get started today at houstonpublicmedia.org/match.
Support comes from the Museum of Fine Arts Houston. A crooked nose, uneven eyes, and elaborate headdress define Picasso's The Yellow Sweater. This and others in masterpieces from the Museum Bergrud, now on view. Details at mfah.org.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now, Ernie Manous and guest host Michael Atkinson.
Star of Hope is a Christ-centered ministry located in the Houston area that's dedicated to serving the spiritual, emotional, and physical needs of those experiencing homelessness in our community. Established in 1907, the ministry has been guided by these principles since their founding, and today stands as one of the nation's oldest and largest homeless shelters. To tell us more about their work and its impact on our community, we're joined by Doug Meikle, President and CEO of Star of Hope. Doug, welcome to Hello Houston.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Just start out, tell us a little bit about your organization and the work that you do.
Well, I think a good way to start is that each day we get a census, how many people are in our care. And this morning, I think it was 922. Yeah. So on average, we care for throughout the year around 950, and that goes up to close to 1,000, sometimes as low as 890 or so. But today, 922, of which 250 are children. These are men, single men, women, and their families that would otherwise be on the street. We house probably and care for around a third of Houston's homeless. We actually have beds for around a half of Houston's housed homeless. So we're a pretty important organization in the city's quest to care for the homeless in Houston. And we've been doing it for a long time. So we've been doing it for 118 years and look forward to doing it for the next 118 years. Yeah.
Pull out a little bit on
Sure.
this whole topic. And we've talked about this quite a bit on the show over time, so I'm just curious your opinion and
Sure.
thought on it. We, Star of Hope, other organizations do a fabulous job of helping those who find themselves in
Yes.
this situation.
Yeah.
From where you sit, what can we as a society, as a city, as a county be doing to not get to this point in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a complex answer. We live in a complex world, and this is one of its complex problems. A couple of context points I think are important. I think first is we will always probably have to deal with homeless because there are systems in place in the world in which we live that create homelessness. I think Houston is a recipient of many people who are paroled out of the criminal justice system. There's not a lot of resources around those folks when they come out of that system, and they are oftentimes end up in homelessness. I think also addiction is a real problem. If you listen to the folks who are in our care, their story is often one of addiction, abandonment, abuse, and loss. Those factors will continue into the future, probably. That's the nature of the world in which we live. So therefore, we'll be dealing with homelessness for as long as we're here in Houston, Texas. Now some positives. I think that Houston has a couple of very good structural advantages. Houston has around 3,000 to 4,000 homelessness. 4+ million Harris County. That number for City, Seattle is size. So Houston has obviously, there are many times when homelessness affects the quality of life as well as and that's really the situation that's been Houston has this problem. it's interesting for you guys to know that for most of the folks in our care, their journey it takes about 7 years or so, some of the research shows, to become chronic homelessness, and it's a series of events. But one foundational event
Alex Lynch, a lawyer and a bioethicist who studies the ethics of clinical trials and the FDA's pharmaceutical policies at the University of Pennsylvania. Holly, welcome to Science Friday.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's get to Chris's experience. I mean, is this the norm that drug developers exclude people from trials who have failed outcomes?
So yes, it's very typical that when you're doing a clinical trial, you need to specify what
might see things like tumor shrinkage, or in the Alzheimer's case, you might have seen in the news some discussion about plaques in the brain, right? These are things that you would need to have a lab test or a scan to see whether they're being affected by the drug, but we think that they're predictive. We're just not 100% sure. So FDA can grant approval of drugs based on those unvalidated surrogate measures. I know that's a lot of jargon, but basically FDA can grant approval based on the prediction of benefit, and when it does that, it requires companies to continue studying the product after it's allowed on the market. So that's one type of flexibility that FDA has, where you can get a drug on the market where we're not even really sure that it works, but we hope it does. It has a lot of discretion in what evidence it's willing to accept to meet that effectiveness standard.
I mean, this Alzheimer's drug that you mentioned, there was some controversy about it getting approved, right? For this reason.
Just a tad. Yeah. Okay, so the Alzheimer's drug that you're referring to is a drug called Aduhelm. It's actually been voluntarily taken off the market by its manufacturer, Biogen. But it was quite controversial. It was using this accelerated approval pathway that I was just describing. So it was approved not based on a demonstrated benefit in Alzheimer's disease outcomes, but rather based on the influence of the drug on these plaques in the brain. It was controversial because both that endpoint seemed to be a bit dicey, right? There was a lot of discussion about whether it was even reasonably likely to predict clinical benefit. The company had also tested that drug against the clinical endpoints, those things about how the patient feels, functions, or survives. And it turned out that the drug wasn't able to demonstrate benefit on any of those. The company relied on these plaques in the brain as kind of a backup to get FDA outside experts to weigh in on these potential drug approval decisions, and they called this advisory committee together. Everybody said FDA, no, standard has not been met here, do not approve this drug, and FDA went ahead and approved it anyway, despite some of the which FDA could grant to companies a voucher in which they promised to review the application in only 2 months rather than 6. And you might think, 4 months, that's not that big of a deal. It's a huge deal to companies, right? 4 months longer on the market of a blockbuster drug is a lot of money. And 4 months fewer to review an application for FDA staff is really, really challenging. And it's important to recognize how FDA engages in its review. They don't just take the company's word for it. They get all of the data that's supporting that product, all the clinical trial data. The FDA is running its own, analyses of those data, really checking that every T is crossed, every I is dotted, so that we can trust the products that are allowed on the market. So the shorter time that the FDA staffers have to review, the more worried we all should be that maybe something important is going to be missed, either around safety or effectiveness. And the other thing I'll add that's changed is FDA is a challenging agency, right? If you think about its role, it's a public health agency. It needs to be science driven, right? But it's not exclusively science driven in the sense that just because a drug has a positive outcome in its trial, that doesn't necessarily mean that FDA should grant approval, right? There are judgment calls about approving new drugs, because very rarely are you getting such amazing trial results that everyone agrees this is, a stupendous, amazing drug and we absolutely should approve it. So when you have those judgment calls, that can lead to the possibility of political interference. In previous administrations, it's really just been up to the FDA staff or boards to decide whether they're pushing approval without the political kind of dipping their hands in those decisions. And that was for very good reason. Nobody wants to be offered a drug in the doctor's office question, well, does this drug actually work in the FDA approved? Or did FDA buddies with the FDA commissioner or the president, right? It's really important to maintain strong separation between those approval decisions and any political interference. And we've seen a lot more political interference for this administration than we've seen in the past.
Holly, thanks for being here today.
Thanks again.
Dr. Holly Fernandez-Lynch is an associate professor of medical ethics and health policy at the University of Pennsylvania. We have to take a break, but when we come back, how an inaudible rumble can make you feel more stressed. This is Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
Science Friday is the greatest and simulated to design and develop engineered systems. MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery in engineering and science. MathWorks.com. Support for Science Friday also comes from Seed.com. Seed's DS11 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic, engineered to survive digestion, support bone regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public. And from Bayer, who believes science is the relentless process of asking questions, testing, and trying again, even when it's not easy. Learn more at ScienceDelivers.com. Science Friday is produced by the Science Friday Initiative, a nonprofit organization that depends on support from individuals. Learn more about their work at ScienceFriday.com.
Did you know your gift to Houston Public Media could go twice or even 3 times as far through your employer's matching gift program? Many companies will match the charitable donations of their employees, and some even match gifts from retirees. That means your support for trusted news and programs could have double the impact for our community. Find out if your company participates at HoustonPublicMedia.org/match.
On the next Planet Money, how George Johnson took a formula for black hair and turned it into an economic and cultural juggernaut.
This is Black Power.
And on How I Built This, 2 early-stage founders get timely business advice from host Guy Raz and the founder of Mrs. Meyer's Clean Day. That's on the next Planet Money and How I Built This from NPR.
Saturdays at 9 a.m. on News 88.7.
Hi, it's Jeremy Hobson, inviting you to join me every Thursday at 8 p.m. here on News 88.7 for The Middle. This weekly live national call-in talk show amplifies the voices of people in the middle, politically, geographically, or philosophically. The Middle is a nonpartisan and non-judgmental space where everyone can feel comfortable sharing their views and being part of the conversation. So join me for The Middle with Jeremy Hobson, Thursdays at 8 p.m. on News 88.7.
This is Science Friday. I'm Flora Lichtman. Old creepy houses are a horror cliche. But why? Why do old abandoned houses freak us out? My next guest has a theory, and it has to do with a rumble that you cannot hear, but is very real. Dr. Rodney Schmaltz, professor of psychology at MacEwan University in Edmonton, Alberta, is here to tell us about his new research. He studies pseudoscience. Rodney, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
Do you think of yourself as a Ghostbuster?
I do not. I am an educator, but I teach a class on scientific skepticism, and we do, in fact, go ghost hunting to debunk the tools you see online and on TV. But I would say I do. What I do is a little bit different than ghost busting.
Do you have an interest in spooky things, spooky houses?
I'm interested in why people have these experiences. So I haven't seen any good evidence for the paranormal or for ghosts, but I do believe that people are genuinely experiencing something. And that's what I'm interested in. What's that something? Why do people feel like they've had these experiences?
Well, let's get into your study because you had a hypothesis that people are feeling something. What were you testing?
We were looking at the impact of infrasound. And infrasound is a low-frequency sound below 20 hertz. We can't consciously hear it, but we can feel it. The way I like to describe it is imagine you're at a concert and there's a lot of bass and you kind of feel that tension in your chest and the hair on the back of your neck might go up, but you know what it's from. It's from the music. But imagine a lower level experience like that, maybe not quite as intense, but you can't hear anything. And infrasound is caused by things like in old buildings, there's low rumbling pipes, or it could be old boilers. As well, it's caused by heavy machinery, traffic, so it's kind of all around us. So in our research, what we did is we brought people into the lab and we exposed them to infrasound or not. And we did that in the presence of relaxing music or more ambient spooky sounds, the kind of thing you'd hear in the background of a horror movie. We took a number of measures, including cortisol. And cortisol is a hormone associated with stress. And what we found was that regardless of the type of music you're listening to, be it creepy or relaxing, cortisol levels went up. On top of that, across both conditions, so across both types of music, people rated the music as sadder, and they found it less interesting. As well, they reported just generally feeling more irritated in the presence of infrasound.
So it's having an effect on us, whether we're cognizant that it's happening or not.
Exactly. And I think it could at least partially explain some hauntings in that sense. So, as you said, if you walk into an old building and you don't know what infrasound is, which most people don't, you're feeling something, especially if you're going to the basement. There's a really good chance that there's some low rumbling pipes down there or an old boiler. And if the setting is right, so it's dark, it's creepy, you feel something, it's quite reasonable for someone to believe that they've experienced a haunting when in fact what they have experienced is an old boiler.
Did you measure infrasound in old houses?
That's actually our follow-up study. So we are looking at that now. We are going to different supposedly haunted locations here in Alberta, and we have control buildings that are not supposedly haunted, and we're looking to see if the infrasound levels are higher in these supposedly haunted places than places that aren't. So we just got started on that. We've only gone to about 4, I think maybe 5 locations now. So it's on its way. We're looking to see if there are any differences there.
Is it difficult to measure infrasound?
It is difficult. You need specialized mics for that, and they're quite expensive. But if you want to see if there's some infrasound, which you can do if you just light a candle or have a lighter and the flame starts to bend kind of in the middle, that's a sign that there's infrasound. And if it kind of bends and then starts turning almost, it looks like it's turning, that's a good sign there's infrasound as well. So I won't tell you how much, but at least you'd know that there's a good chance that there's some infrasound present.
That's also a sign of ghosts.
The spinning flame does seem ghost-like, but I assure you it's not. It is caused by infrasound.
Are we encountering infrasound in other places?
We are. There's infrasound all around us. Traffic generates infrasound. Subways could generate it. Heavy machinery. So it's around. one interesting aspect of our study is to also look at it in the context of noise pollution. So is this infrasound impacting people? Now, I don't want to go beyond our data, so I can't definitively say, but what we found was that at least in a 5-minute exposure, cortisol levels went up a little bit. Now, it could be the case that when people are exposed to it for longer periods of time, maybe they habituate. Or it could be the case that maybe over longer periods of time that there's this kind of cumulative effect and people just feel some stress. So we know there's some research showing that people tend to feel more stress in urban rather than rural environments, but this wouldn't explain all of that, but maybe it would be a small piece of the puzzle, but definitely more research to be done before we can make any claims either way there.
You know, big picture, tell me about how this fits in with your research generally, this haunted house study.
Well, I'm interested in why people believe in things that don't have good evidence. So helping people become better consumers of information. And once people believe something, we know it's really hard to change their minds. And part of the reason is that when you tell someone that something is false, say that ghosts don't exist, you've created this cognitive gap. So they've experienced something, it felt ghost-like, and then somebody comes along and says, there's no evidence for ghosts. It's like, well, then what did I experience? So I hope research like this will give people some, at least some pause to think, oh, okay, maybe what I experienced is an old low rumbling pipe or an old boiler. So what we're doing then is helping fill in that cognitive gap. So my colleagues are more interested kind of in the noise pollution side. I'm more interested in kind of the education side and giving people explanations for supposedly paranormal events.
Yeah, and taking people's experiences of the world seriously enough to investigate them.
Absolutely. Like I said, people are experiencing something. It's a genuine feeling. And we know from past research that expectation is a huge driver of experiencing anomalous or paranormal things. So if you've been